So on the loungy side, it might not actually begin until past because that's the schedule. Okay, just to let you know, guys, we are now live on the loungy.
Just give it 30 seconds, Helen, if that's okay, please.
Mm-hmm. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the International Fundraising Across Borders 2021. It's good to be back. My name is Helen Maynard-Hill, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all today. A very warm welcome to all of the attendees who are joining us today from hopefully all over the world. I'm here in the Netherlands, but British born, and we're joined by people from all over, so thank you for joining. We're looking forward to spending the whole day or most of the morning with you, and thank you for attending IFAB 2021 and also for the work that everybody does every single day. We're very pleased to partner with philanthropic expert and industry leaders for IFAB, and thank you to today's partners, WealthX, Bloomerang and Loungy, for your partnership and being a key part of IFAB 2021. Before I introduce our panelists and keynote speaker, please let me share some housekeeping and some information that's important for you all to know for today. Each session is 50 minutes long, and there'll be 10-minute breaks at 9:50, 10:50 and 11:50, and these are all GMT. Just to be clear, it's GMT time. The sessions are cultivation, stewardship, prospect research, tax and legal, and we also have a bonus session at the end where we're talking about how fundraisers can treat their donors as clients, which is going to be very interesting. We've also got time for Q&As and networking. After IFAB ends, you'll receive an email with links for access to all of the sessions. So don't worry if you miss it, because you'll get access to view them afterwards. In a moment, there'll be a short poll for all the attendees. Please complete the poll to introduce yourselves and share a bit of information about what brings you to IFAB. So the poll is in your Chaplain York Connect platform, which everybody should log into and be a part of, because it helps with the chat rooms, the networking, and there's also the poll there as well. So the poll is now open. It's only open for 30 minutes. So if you can, whilst you're listening to me and to the others, obviously, if you can log on to that, it closes at 9 o'clock GMT. If you go into Chaplain York Connect, you'll see there's a chat, Q&A and poll section. Obviously, click on the poll section to complete the poll. Makes sense. You start easy. So again, my name's Helen. I'm the Executive Director of Chaplain York Foundation in the Netherlands. I'm very pleased to be here as an IFAB panelist, but also hopefully coaching the day along. So please allow me to take a moment to introduce my fellow panelists. I'm very pleased to be joined by Graham Pampenfuss, CFRE. Graham is the Development Director of Kingswood School in Bath in England, a very beautiful part of the world, and has over 25 years fundraising, alumni and development experience in South Africa, Zimbabwe and the UK. Joining him is Leslie Liddell. Leslie is Head of Business Development for Cape Town Opera and is very passionate about the work that she does. Cape Town Opera is Africa's premier operatic company and one of South Africa's largest permanent non-profit performing arts organisations. Leslie manages a portfolio of over 200 donors, including individuals, trusts, foundations, government institutions and corporate donors, as well as various partnerships from South Africa and abroad. Olivia Soray also joins us. Olivia is the executive director, the new executive director of Chaplin York, Switzerland, and we're very pleased to have him on the team. Olivia is an expert in NPO management, communication, fundraising, and digital for social good. Olivia has over 15 years of professional experience in the fields of social economy, human rights, peace, development, humanitarian aid, in Switzerland and also internationally. And last but by no means least is Arno Masilehe. I'm sorry if I said that wrong, Masilehe. Masilehe, sorry, Arno.
That's okay, everybody does it.
Arno is the president of the iFilm Group and offers more than 20 years experience. His international career has led him to advise major institutions in France and again all over the world. We're very pleased to have Arno on board with this vast experience of global fundraising. Arno is a regular speaker at IFC, CASE and other global fundraising conferences. So I think you'll all agree that it's a really worldly team that we got on board today. Finally, again, but absolutely no means least, let me introduce our keynote speaker, Louise Morris. So Louise is a major donor specialist. She's a consultant, speaker, and a trainer. She's a founder of Summit Fundraising with over 15 years of major gift fundraising experience with international charities of all sizes, including the Red Cross, Medical Aid for Palestine, ACE Africa, Windle INSP, which is the International Network of Street Papers, Earthwatch, Practical Action, Aid to the Church, and the Brook, and has helped over 100 charities raise large gifts and supported many fundraisers along the way. We're really pleased to kick off today with Louise. She's also a former fundraising director and a trustee of the NGO Women and Children First. So a lot of experience under her belt and lots more to come. So we're very much looking forward to hearing Louise speak. So without further ado, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Louise. And it's over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Helen, for a really lovely introduction. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for giving up your time this morning. Helen mentioned I work with a range of charities, and I was working with one UK-based charity who did some really incredible medical research, they still do, into a sensory disability, something that's very common. And I was working with them on how they could make their case more compelling to major donors and where those potential major donors might be. And I remember asking them the question, what makes your organisation so unique? We all know that that's very important, and you will all have unique things about the causes you work for. And when I asked that question, the CEO said to me, we're the only charity focusing on this. And so I said, the only charity in the UK focusing on this condition specifically? And he said, no, in the world. We're the only charity in the world doing this. And then when I unpicked some more about their research, well, as many of you will know, if you've been involved in medical research, it's a global field. As we found out through COVID, we have scientists and experts working globally on it. Yet their supporters were only resident and UK based. And they hadn't thought outside the borders of the UK. The title of this conference is International Fundraising Across Borders. And we know our donors' worlds are so often across borders. The opportunities are across many borders. And to just highlight why it's so great you've given up your time today. Well, first of all, you've got some amazing speakers and incredible experience in the virtual room, as you just heard. And you've got the chance to network with each other, which particularly when many of us are at home, it's incredibly valuable. But fundraising across borders, fundraising internationally is relevant for every cause. whether you are a French charity and your services are delivered in France, or whether you're an international NGO and you're delivering services helping communities across the globe. If you are that French charity and you're working regionally, your donors aren't just going to stop at the French borders. We know that the richest 1% of people in the world do the most travel. They're responsible for the most carbon emissions. We'll kind of come on to that and some of the challenges around travel internationally. But your donors aren't stopping at borders. So whether your work is international or your work is within one country or even a region, the cost of not focusing internationally is huge. I mentioned just a missed opportunity there with a UK charity. And other organisations I've worked with who've started to think about this was a UK-based NGO, so an international delivery charity, but registered in the UK. And they hadn't yet thought about building connections with donors in the countries that they were supporting. And actually, we know when donors are connected, they feel really passionate about what's happening. They want to get involved, but they hadn't thought about the people closest to the countries they were operating in. And as well as new opportunities, this international focus is so important for your current donors. As I mentioned, they don't just stop at the borders. And I know many of you will have had challenges, and even in COVID. So I interviewed a philanthropist, a multimillionaire during the lockdown, who's sometimes about 50% of the time based in Britain, but he was in Florida. He managed to fly over there in his second home in the lockdown. I've met an investment manager based in London who spent half of his year in Beijing because that's where his clients were and that's where the markets were that he was operating in. I've met with a donor who grew up in Addis in Ethiopia and had lived in London for 20 years, but had that real connection still with Addis and with Ethiopia and with any charities working in that country. A chair of a fundraising committee that I work with her for a number of years. And she raised a lot of money for a UK-based charity. Every January to March, she would go to South Africa from Britain. I'm in a pretty cold room at the moment in November in Britain, so I'm not sure that that's a bad idea. But she just wasn't in the UK, she was traveling. And yes, I haven't gone completely mad. I know COVID has affected travel and I will come on to that. But I chatted to a British fundraiser based in a UK charity for the first time in lockdown. We had a virtual coffee, a virtual meeting. And it was last March, which in the UK is really quite chilly. And I saw she was wearing a t-shirt and I thought that was a bit strange. And so I found out a little bit more about her. She was in the Bahamas. So, you know, as fundraisers, you know, Helen's talked about how she was living in Britain and has gone to Netherlands. We travel, people travel. We are a global community. So why am I telling you this? A lot of it you will know, you'll be aware of. Well, I'm approaching international fundraising less about there being borders and more about let's think how we can transcend those borders and make the most of opportunities. There is a huge amount of opportunity, but I realize it's not always easy. I've done major donor fundraising myself and I've loved it and had really rewarding experiences. I've also found it really tough sometimes. I've been a director of fundraising. I've worked with like over 100 different charities. So I'm going to share a little bit of some of the perspectives of maybe and themes, how we can take this international fundraising forward. And I would say there is maybe one question that you could ask yourself as an organization, which might help you in this area. And that question would be, who is working on your major donor fundraising? And where are they? It's actually two questions, isn't it? Not one. But who is working on your major donor fundraising? And where are they? Where are they meeting donors? Where are they based? I'll just outline why I'm asking this question. So I talked about maybe, you know, your services, the people that you support, the work that you do is in one country. So maybe that work that you do is in the UK. Are you traveling to meet potential donors? Dependent on the restrictions in your country and globally where your donors are at the moment, this is going to be quite variable. But in the UK, certain donors are a lot more comfortable meeting now. You can meet inside. It's opened up a huge amount of opportunities. And I was coaching a fundraiser the other week, and she said, you know, I feel, she had a really good relationship going with the donor and said, I really feel that, you know, we've met a couple of times virtually. I want to travel to meet him and discuss a bit more about how he might want to be involved. And I said, brilliant, you know, kind of what's stopping you? She said, well, it's £90 on the train. £90, let's spend it. And I think sometimes we don't give ourselves the time and permission to actually travel. Yes, digital is brilliant. I'll come on to that. It plays a fantastic role, but we know that there are some relationships, and many relationships will only have that high level of trust that major donors need to give larger gifts when we meet face to face. So yes, let's travel. And internationally too, well, yes, I've been working with a conflict charity who are providing support and disaster relief in the Middle East, and they have started to have some in-person major donor dinners. And they haven't been able to take anybody out to the regions that they work in to see how their gifts are making a difference for 3 years, 2.5 years now. And they thought, we'll just ask at this dinner, we'll get a sense, because it was quite a small intimate dinner, of how our donors are feeling and if they'd want to do that in 2022. With the caveats that we're not sure exactly when. There might be a May trip and a July trip, and we don't know exactly where COVID's going to take us. So I said to them, you know, how did your donors respond? What were they thinking? Unanimously, they wanted to go. They're just desperate to see the work, see how their money's helped. A UK-based air ambulance charity, which is in the UK very much like an emergency service. I'm working with a fundraiser there, and she's just opened the air base, which can you imagine is quite exciting. So they're allowed to take kind of donors with some COVID restrictions around the base, show them the helicopters, show them what's happening. She did that for the first time in 2 years the other week, and she got an £18,000 donation straight afterwards. That £18,000 donation would not have happened on a virtual meeting. So let's be thinking about traveling, thinking about moving, and actually investing in travel if we need to build those relationships. And next time you're recruiting for major donor resource, some of you might be expanding your teams, or you might have a vacancy. Do they have to be based in your country? If you're a private school or a university and you've got a lot of alumni living in the US, why not open out your role to somebody living in the US to build those relationships and build those networks? And again, some of you might be doing this anyway. I'm working with a UK-based charity who support a network of homeless charities across the globe. And they've got some small local networks, but they recruited a US director a couple of years ago. And from that has come so much opportunity for high net worth individuals, trusts and foundations, because they have that presence and that staff presence in the States. And now they're expanding. They're keeping that role really open, because it's going to be home working and some travel, but that person could be based in Europe, where some of the networks are. They could be based in the US. And that means you're also getting the best talent. And trustees. So the charity that I'm trustee of are looking to recruit more trustees from the Global South, because a lot of the communities that we support are in the Global South. The communities themselves are really, really involved, which is fantastic. But actually at board level, they're not. It's the right thing to do. We need a more diverse board, but it also means that we can understand those countries and those networks better. So as well as staff, where are your trustees? Because throughout all of this is diversity. If you are approaching a major donor who maybe travels a lot across Europe and maybe views themselves as quite European, and if you're a UK-based charity trying to attract and build relationships with a donor like that, if they look at your board and they think they're all UK-based, UK-educated, UK involved, it can feel quite parochial. You're not necessarily appealing to them and appealing across those borders, because we do have identities and strong identities as individuals, and your donors will be the same based on where we grew up. I mentioned the donor who grew up in Addis in Ethiopia but lived in London, based on where we were educated, based on where we travel, where we're living, where our businesses are. And thinking broadly and internationally really helps us to tap into that and understand our donors and their worlds and understand how they're thinking. And in terms of diversity, it gives us a real opportunity thinking internationally as well to just broaden our base of donors in terms of disability, of colour, of sex. You might have predominantly male donors. Denitra Griffin is the CEO of Always Giving Back Foundation, and she spoke last year at a conference on the theme of Black Lives Matters, talking about how donors are getting savvier. They are looking at the makeup of the board. And frankly, if you've got an all-white board, why would a donor of colour want to support you if they don't see that diversity reflected? So a few points there around travel. I haven't gone mad. I've noticed there's been a pandemic, and I know travel has changed, the way we communicate has changed. We're all having a conference virtually, which is fantastic, which I'm not sure maybe we would have done 3 years ago. So another theme that I think is really important and that you all know is the role of virtual and digital and how we can use that in connecting with our major donors and potential major donors. And I'm sure this will be touched on today when we're thinking about stewardship and conservation. Don't assume people won't engage digitally, and don't assume people are zoomed out. You might feel zoomed out after a day of meetings with your internal team where you don't feel you've really come off the screen. But for me, it's about being really strategic about when we engage with our major donors and potential major donors face to face and potentially travel, and when we engage with them virtually. And I think that's a huge opportunity in terms of trying to understand their worlds, what's right for them and what's more likely to get them to engage with us and our cause, what's right for them. So for example, that first initial meeting, we know we want more meetings. We know that we need to find out what our potential donors' passions, interests are. If they've given a smaller gift, we want to be able to ask, how did you come across us as a cause? How did you find us? But we need a conversation to do that. Virtual meetings is such a gift to be able to do that. One fundraiser I was working with, it did it brilliantly in lockdown. She called quite a few of the lower level donors who she thought could give more and could be major donors. So they'd identified their wealth. And for some of them who were on Apple, she said, oh, you know, could we switch to FaceTime? All of a sudden, you're kind of having a virtual meeting without scheduling a virtual meeting. There was a UK national health charity I worked with who'd been trying to get a meeting with a venture capitalist for about 18 months before COVID. So he'd given a 4-figure gift, but they knew he could give a 6 or 7-figure gift, technically, if he wanted to, but they were really trying to have that conversation and struggling. He was busy, he was traveling a lot. Within 3 weeks of COVID hitting, they got a virtual meeting with the key fundraising lead and the CEO. Now, obviously, there was a lot of stuff going on when the pandemic hit, and quite a few people's reaction was to give back and to do more charity. But I have no doubt that the fact that that meeting was offered virtually had a key part in them having that conversation. Previously, in the 1.5 years they were trying to meet with him, they hadn't offered a virtual meeting. And actually, many of us maybe hadn't as well. So it's not a criticism, it's just a thinking of these changes. And I was working with a UK-based charity who were doing work internationally, really kind of, I would say, unsexy work. This is not children, this is not cancer, this is not kind of something that maybe you think is easy to fundraise for. They had a donor approach them, never given before, saying, I love your work, I think it's really important now more than ever. Could we have a chat about what you might do if I gave you £500,000? What's not to like about that? Excellent. So the fundraiser then tries to set up a meeting between the CEO, who was based in London, and this donor. And what happened? Went very cold. Many of you might have had that yourselves. When the trail just goes cold, it's really hard to get a hold of somebody. You don't just want to keep on emailing. And so coaching her, I said to her, you know, what do you know about this donor? And she said, oh, I don't know much at all because he's never given before, we haven't met him. So I said, well, take a step back, you know, where does he work? So he worked in London and the head office of the business was in London. And at the time in the summer, a lot of our offices in London had reopened post one of the many lockdowns. So we kind of get a picture that maybe he's in London a bit more. And then I asked the question, does he travel? Where does he live? And this is when it comes back to how many people don't live in one place and maybe have multiple residences in multiple countries. And she said, well, he's got other offices in 6 countries in the world. And from what I've seen online, I think he spends quite a lot of time in each of those countries. Okay, so all of a sudden we're building up a picture of this donor who we've never met, who we've only done some basic desk research on, but we're getting a feel for how he might be more likely to meet. And is it a case of trying to schedule when he's in London, and she didn't have a PA's contact, by the way, which might be in 4 months' time, and trying to line that up with the charity's CEO diary? Well, that sounds just really difficult, doesn't it? But what she did do was offer a virtual meeting and said, you know, I'm aware there might be some time differences. We can be flexible, early or late. Have you got 20 minutes where we can have a quick virtual chat? All of a sudden, for that donor, he can take that virtual call at the airport. He can take it in Miami. He can take it wherever he is. So I think the mix of digital and in person is a real gift actually now for us as fundraisers, and ones that we can seize. A university who've got a number of alumni in Beijing, all of a sudden, they're not having to fly to Beijing and with all of the carbon footprint that involves for maybe 1 or 2 meetings, and having to try and line those meetings up with their prospects in Beijing so that they're on a Monday, Tuesday and a Wednesday because they don't want a wasted trip. Well, actually, maybe one of the business people they want to meet or one of their prospects isn't in Beijing on that day. What can we do now? We can have that initial virtual chat and we can see where that prospect is at, how involved they might be, what their interest is. And then we can fly a bit later in the stage, potentially. And there's a private school I've been working with in the UK, and they have identified that some of their key prospects are based in the US. So they had their education, it's an all-girls school, they had their education in the UK and then moved to the US and have been very successful. So before COVID, she used to fly over to the US, but they're not all in the same parts of the States. If anybody's in the States, I know it's not the same time zone today, but you know, it's enormous. There's one over on the West Coast, there's one on the East Coast. So she's flying around the States, meeting these individual alumni, building relationships, thanking them for their gifts. Actually, the world of virtual has meant she's got this really unique opportunity now to bring them together virtually. And frankly, people are only zoomed out if we call our virtual meetings, our virtual events, boring stuff like come join us for a webinar. Well, a webinar is not very exciting. If it's a case of you've got the chance to come along and meet some of the old girls, that's their kind of nickname, that's what they call people who come through this school, who are also based in the UK, who also care about this cause, actually, that's a great lunch that I can have virtually. I don't think of it as another Zoom or another Teams meeting or another time looking at the screen. So sometimes it's how we are pitching and talking about these virtual experiences as well. And there was a medical research charity in lockdown who did virtual tours of their medical research for small groups of major donors. And it took a bit of planning because they were going around the lab and they wanted to show some of the science, but the feedback they got from their donors, loads of them said, can you do this again? It means I don't have to travel to London. I love it. And actually that's automatically now open. You could have people from across the globe coming in to those virtual research tours. So there have been virtual events that have been more powerful than in-person ones. And let's not forget things I know some of you will be using, like WhatsApp, which means we can instantly send meaningful thank you video messages. If you've got somebody working on the services of your charity, or if you're in an arts charity and there's a performance, you can instantly send a clip. You can really connect quickly with people wherever they are in the world. So to sum up, international fundraising, it's not a nice to have. Whether you're based in one country, in South Africa, in France, in the UK and what you're doing is in that country, what your charity is doing, your vision, there are opportunities and implications across borders. People may have grown up in your city and then moved away. People might be traveling. Who is connected to your region, to your cause, to your area? And I know you're going to get some great tips on prospecting on this today. It's not a nice to have, it is an essential. And I know that if you can take just some small tips from today, if there's, when I'm at conferences, I kind of love it and I write down millions of notes. But I would say if there's 1, 2, or 3 things that you can write down that are actually actionable, that you can do in the next couple of days, small steps to get you closer to broadening out those opportunities internationally, I think it will be like a really good use of your time today. Because as we build relationships more broadly, as we get to meet more different people, engage them with our cause, it's hugely rewarding. And ultimately, it means we're going to raise more. And that's why we all do what we do, isn't it? We're all working in the sector because we want the world to be that little bit better. And we need money. Our causes need money to do that. So you will raise more looking more broadly, and hopefully you'll enjoy it as well. So thank you so much for listening today. I really appreciate the opportunity as well to have spoken. This is me, I'm Louise Morris, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter at Summit Fundraise. And if you like some of the perspectives, I send out weekly email tips. So the QR code on the top left there, you can just open your phone camera. Feel free to sign up. I do some free events as well. And I do coaching, training and consultancy. So if you think you want to be raising more and you want some more confidence to be able to do that, then don't hesitate to get in touch. I know you're going to have a fantastic day. Thank you to Helen and the folks at Chapel and York for asking me to speak, and have a great day.
Brilliant. Thank you, Louise. Lovely. What a wonderful introduction. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your insight. That was really inspiring. And you're right, international fundraising is essential, we know, because we're here. It's not a nice to have, it's an essential. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, in fact I'm very sure that today isn't just another boring webinar. Today is going to be really interesting and exciting. So without further ado, just to let everybody know, I think the poll is now closed, so thank you to everybody that joined in. We've already got some people on the chat room, so keep that coming through. We're going to be monitoring that all morning. Yeah, thank you for a brilliant keynote, says Lewis or Louise. Sorry if I said your name wrong, but that's brilliant. So yeah, I'm going to move along steadily because we have got a jam-packed day today. To introduce Dave Shepherd. So Dave's going to talk to us about cultivation. Dave is a founder and principal at Shepherd Consulting and has 30 years experience in the school sector. He's both an educator and a senior administrator. Dave specialises in the full range of advancement disciplines, as well as executive coaching and mentoring, volunteer management, senior strategic leadership and training for international independent schools. So he's very busy in the education sector internationally. Additionally to all of that, Dave is an associate at Moore Partnership and is one of over 20 consultants that help organisations to achieve their philanthropic goals. Previously to doing that, Dave was the inaugural director of the College of Advancement at United World Colleges in Southeast Asia, a non-profit international school in Singapore with 5,500 students and 20,000 alumni, so that kept him busy, I'm sure. Dave has presented regularly at CASE events because he's involved in the education side of fundraising, and has served as a faculty member of CASE Asia Pacific Institute in educational fundraising and at the CASE Philanthropy Commission. Dave was in fact made a CASE laureate in 2019, so congratulations to Dave, and also awarded the Crystal Apple for outstanding teaching in 2020. We're beyond pleased to welcome Dave as our session speaker, our first session speaker. So thank you, Dave, for joining us and for being willing to impart your very experienced knowledge. So I'm going to hand over the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Helen. Really appreciate that. Hello, everybody. Looking at the attendee list and some very familiar names on there for me as well, and a lot that are not. So welcome to all of you. The purpose of this session is to provoke thought and prompt some really good discussion with the panel. So I will raise a few issues and a few points over about 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up to the panel to explore some of these ideas, and then to you as to be able to share some of your thoughts and views as well, because I know that we will have a huge amount of experience in the group, and a large range of experience. So some of you will have been doing this work for many years and will have lots to contribute as well. So please do so. We will focus predominantly on major giving as a focus for this session, but do keep in mind annual and regular giving and legacy giving as well. They are very much a part of this whole topic. I do have a couple of slides. Helen, are you able to pop those up for me, please? Thanks. If you can go to the next one, please. So I think the topic of cultivation, when I was asked to speak on this, I started jotting some notes down and realized that we could spend an entire day looking at cultivation and the different issues and elements around it. It's, I think, one of the best ways that I describe the topic of cultivation. It's a real crossroads. It's a topic where we are looking at, from an internal perspective, what we do with our internal processes, with our management, with making sure that we know who is where on our journey. And it's also, most importantly, an external journey. It's that building of relationships that we have with our individual donors, with our broader community, if we're looking at annual and regular giving. But it's essentially, it's about relationships. And everything that we do on the journey of cultivation is trying to bring people closer to us as an organization, so that we are able to hopefully meet donor expectations and secure some support. So I think one of the first things that we've really got to look at is making sure that the internal language, the internal activity, the jargon associated around major gift fundraising and cultivation doesn't permeate into those conversations with our potential supporters. So keeping those elements apart, I think, is really important. So we're trying to bring the joy, we're trying to build relationships to bring people closer to us. Helen, if you go to the next slide, please. So our work in quotes, and I've chosen these 4 quotes for slightly different reasons, and I will let you have a moment just to read them. So I think the first quote is very much about education. It's about helping people understand what it is that we are about. Many people want to do really good work, but they're not sure how or where or how to go about doing it. So your cultivation journey is about explaining to people what their journey would be like with you. I think the second and third quotes are quite similar. And I think we can often get bogged down with what our needs are. We need a new building, we need scholarships, we need a new lifeboat. And I think it's really important that we take a step back, and we're very, very deliberate in being able to explain what cause we are actually promoting, what impact we will actually have. And one of the questions that it's very good to ask of yourself is, why should I care? What it is about the work that you do that people should care about? And in some instances, it's very obvious. People that have been affected by medical illnesses, diseases, can often relate very closely to they care about a particular disease being cured or having a solution to that. For other organisations, it's not so easy, and particularly the background that I have in international schools, it's often a lot more challenging to be able to present the why should I care in that environment. I think the last quote is also quite revealing as well, and obviously Bill Gates, known to all of you, but I find this quote is quite an interesting one. In the terms of our cultivation, somebody like Bill Gates has made his fortunes by being very deliberate, by being very strategic, by taking very carefully chosen journeys and investments down the routes that he's made. And I think what he's basically saying here is that it's the same process that's needed when he's investing in his philanthropic work. What is it that he needs to see in order to make a philanthropic gift? So when we're cultivating people who have made their philanthropic endeavors through business, we're trying to show and showcase what it is about our organization that you should believe in. So if people do care about the topic that you are working towards, that's great, and that's really important. But there are probably many organizations that are trying to find solutions to those particular world problems. Why would you give to one particular cancer charity over another cancer charity? So the why should I care is a really important question to be able to answer. But why should I believe in your organization is equally important. And as you're taking a donor through the conversations, being able to ensure that the why do I care is something that's really important to them, but being able to articulate what it is about your organization that actually can make a difference to that cause. The third piece of that, of course, is what difference would a gift make from me now? And being able to articulate what it is about your organization, your programs, your priorities that will actually be able to make a difference at this point in time. So building up the trust, building up that long-term belief in your work by answering those questions, I think is really important. If we go to the next slide, please, Helen. Again, I'm not going to teach anybody to suck eggs. This is a diagram that most of you will have seen in varying different guises. But the reason that I've included it here is because it often does identify a section called cultivation phase. And whilst that's really important, being able to have a plan for an individual to bring them closer to your organization to answer those three questions, I think it's also important to realize that the cultivation phase happens throughout the entire fundraising cycle. You're trying to build up a relationship with an individual or a group of people, and they will be looking at you to see how you are going about doing that. And that happens right down at the research stage. What do you know about somebody? How do you articulate that to them? That's giving them an understanding of how you're going about your work. The stewardship phase equally is a cultivation phase. As you are interacting with your donors, being able to continue that conversation, to build the trust, so that we're hopefully gaining ongoing support. There's quite a bit of research out there with organizations that have raised huge amounts of money, and they've looked at the number of gifts that people give before they give a really significant gift. And you'll probably find that when people are giving gifts in the $1 million range, £1 million range, they've probably given 10 or 12 times to that organization before they make the commitment to make a really big gift. They're testing you out. They're seeing if your word is what you say it is when you have those initial conversations with people. So cultivating people is not just for a first gift, it's for that ongoing relationship to build up that level of understanding so that the commitment is continued and hopefully increased. That same research that shows that people give bigger gifts after they've given quite a few gifts, if you look at the average size of the first gift that group of people made, it's often very small, in the hundreds of pounds, hundreds of dollars. So again, people are testing you out. They're seeing whether your journey is, as you said, it would be right at the very beginning. Helen. So a couple of other thoughts on cultivation, and I put 4 points down here. I think it's really, really important to understand, or try to understand, the motivation of the people that we are speaking with. Not focusing on what you need, not focusing on your goals and your fundraising targets, but really taking the time to understand what is motivating the individual or the group of people that you're speaking to, if it's through annual and regular giving. And we're trying to find that sweet spot where what you need and what you want to have supported gels with those passions and commitments that the individual or the group of people want to support. And this is a skill that takes time to evolve and develop, but really working out what motivates people, and often realizing that they don't know themselves. Not always. They know that they want to do some good work in a particular area, but how they want to do that, what that actually looks like, is often undefined and not clear when you first start speaking with people. So taking the time to really understand people and what their motivations are, I think, is a very important element. The second piece down there is the story. And I'm a firm believer that the story is absolutely crucial. If you haven't taken the time to really develop your narrative, to really understand the why people should care with the cause that you're working towards, why your organization is one that has got the capacity to solve those problems, and what is the difference that you can make with their support right now. That story, that journey that you're taking people down, needs to be really well articulated, and it takes time and it takes intention to create that, and make sure that all the people in your organization are fluent in that conversation. The third piece that I put down there is leadership. I worked at a school where a head once stood up and said, "How many admissions officers do you think we have?" And people were saying 5, 6, 7. And he said, "Actually, no, we've got 250. We've got every single teacher in the school is an admissions officer. It's how you tell the story, it's how you present the school, it's how you are able to engage with people." And Lorna Summers, who many of you will know from McMaster University in Canada, she often talks about it takes a village. And I think the important thing around cultivation is it's not the job for a fundraiser sitting in an office down the corridor. If you're going to be an organization that fundraisers, that might be the case. But if you're an organization that is a fundraising organization, then this will permeate throughout the entire organization. The leadership, your volunteers, your staff, your colleagues, your supporters, it's a team effort. And I think often cultivation is seen as a mechanical activity that is just for a couple of fundraisers to do, when actually it's something that we need everybody to be part of. And the last one is the infrastructure. And this is where we don't want it to bleed into our relationships with others, but having really strong processes and practices behind the scenes to track those major gift conversations, the relationships with larger groups, and the ability to manage that pipeline really effectively. Helen. So just coming towards the end of this part of before we open it up to the panel, and we open it up to all of you as well. Cultivation in a post-pandemic world, what's changed? Well, we heard from the previous presentation that some people are very happy to remain on Zoom, on virtual activities. We've heard that others are absolutely desperate to get back to being face-to-face and working again with people in situ. So I think one of the most important things when we're thinking about how we work our cultivation approaches is to listen. Is to make sure that we understand what it is that individual donor's preferences are. Yes, some people will want to get straight back behind a desk and then meet you in for lunch or for dinner in their office, and they'll want to get back to face-to-face conversations. For other people, it's freed them from having to travel, having to spend a lot of time. And it's not that they don't necessarily want to meet you. They can just get 5 things done in a day, where before they could only get 2 things done in the day. So listening to how people want to interact with you and recognizing that that will be different for different people. And this brings up its own issues as well. If you've got a group of people who some want to meet you face to face, and others within the group who want to or prefer to be in a virtual environment, that's going to create some challenging moments for you. And they're not necessarily answers, but they're certainly things to think about. But asking people's preferences, I think, is something that's really important. Priorities. You've been cultivating your major donors and your supporters probably for many months, many years. Have their priorities changed? Has the pandemic changed how people view their philanthropic work, where they want to focus their priorities? Making sure that you check in and that you have those realignment conversations to make sure that what they wanted to do before the pandemic is actually something they still want to do, or have new opportunities become available for you. If you're in the university sector, have you been part of the solution to COVID? Has that generated different conversations for you and your donors? So looking at your priorities and their priorities and making sure that you've got that realignment in this new world, I think is something that is worth spending some time doing. And we touched briefly on meetings and events, but when are people ready to get back? What will that look like? It's going to be a hybrid. It's not going to be back to normal in the way it was before. And it's important to ask people what it is that they would like to do and how they would like to operate, and build your new practice around that. I'm conscious of time, and I think I've actually hit my 20 minutes spot on. Helen's nodding, so that's good. If you want to lose the slides, Helen, we can finish with those.
I appreciate the consciousness of time, Dave. Thank you. And thank you to everybody that's been commenting. We've had some really good feedback. It's been very positive. We've also got some questions. So I want to involve the panel, because as well as looking very pretty, we want to get their thoughts and insight as well. So I think I'm just going to dive in and go for the first question, which is from Sandra. So I'll say the question, and then I'll kind of address it to one of you. So the question is, how do you arrange the cultivation phase? So maybe if we start with Graham, just because you're on my screen on my right. So Graham, what do you think? How do you arrange the cultivation phase?
Helen, hi, thanks very much, and a warm welcome from my side to everyone. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you to Louise and Dave for inspiring presentations. Cultivation is absolutely crucial, as Dave was saying, to everything we do. Now, my major experience has been in schools. Kingswood is my 7th school. I have worked a number of years in charities, but I'm speaking predominantly from a school point of view. Cultivation is continuous. It doesn't start, and in a sense, it doesn't finish. You don't spend Monday cultivating and Friday asking, and you don't only cultivate someone and then ask them and then move on. And I think back to my very short stint in life assurance, selling life assurance, where you built a relationship, you sold someone a policy, and then you were told to move on. Stop talking to that person. You've got their money, find someone else. I would rather build the relationship with that person, and you will generate another policy out of them. And I think in terms of cultivation, it's the same. We all do the same thing differently. Our schools, our charities, our organizations are very, very different. But as Dave said, it's all about relationship building. And that relationship building be different for every single person at every single situation. I've had some of my trustees on boards who've said to me, so Graham, how many people are you going to see today? How many are you going to see tomorrow? And how many gifts are you going to get? And my answer is, I have no idea. You know, it's not just sausage machine factory that you're working on. It's a personal relationship building. Yes, you have targets. Yes, you have processes that you need to meet, but that's where low-hanging fruit comes in. So if you can target those people who are close to the organization, who there's already a relationship, you can cultivate them in a sense quicker. I hate that word, but you can do it a bit quicker. But really building relationships takes time, and you need to work at your donor's pace, not at your pace. Does that help, Helen?
Yeah, brilliant. So that kind of maybe leads on to the next question from Sandra, which maybe Olivia, you can try to discuss. The question is, which actions are the ones you recommend to cultivate those relationships? So Graham talked about the need to build those relationships. What would you say would be a good action to cultivate those relationships?
Well, it's about relationship, and Dave mentioned that it's not something that shall be mechanical. We are talking human to human. It's a one-to-one relationship. You have to build trust, authenticity, and fundraising, telling stories goes through emotions, and you can connect, bring closer the people to your organization through those messages, through the stories you are going to tell. So it will depend on the person you identify in front of you, what kind of action you should take. And listening is key in what Dave mentioned. So sometimes just sending a little WhatsApp with a picture of a video or something is already an action that will bring that person closer to your cause, to what you are doing. So I would say just start with a normal relationship and understand who is the person in front of you, and then build the trust step by step, as you would do with a friend, with a new person you encounter.
Lovely, Olivia. Leslie, do you have anything to add to that, do you think, about cultivating the relationships?
Yes, I would like to add to that, in the way that I always feel that never underestimate who you're speaking to or the opportunities presented to you. When you are connecting with anyone, keep it at the back of your head that they're a potential donor, and that find out all there is to find out about them, what makes them tick, what are their interests, and there's always a ripple effect, and donors will start by giving small amounts, but when there is that shared interest, it grows to bigger and better things.
Lovely, thank you, Leslie. Arnaud, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Dave, and thank you, Louise. Both Louise and Dave talked about the post-COVID and post-COVID relationship with donors and cultivation. And I think one thing Dave said is very relevant, and it's happening with me right now with my clients. Before, during COVID situation, there was no option, it was Zoom. And since it's getting a little better, I have some clients, some prospective donors that are actually requesting an in-person meeting or lunch or coffee, and some others don't even mention it and keep going with the Zoom way of dealing. And I think it's important, like Dave said, to listen to the people we're talking to and see if they ask for in person, and if they request for in person when it is possible. And obviously, I'm talking about people that are living in your city. Traveling is another thing.
Yep. Yeah, I think we're all facing it's a difficult moment because from my own experience, you think things are opening up and then they're closing again and things keep changing. So I think it's difficult because one thing that Sandra mentions is, trying to build a relationship, and we've all agreed that that the internet has allowed us to access people that we might not before, but it's always good to have face-to-face as and when you can. So Graham, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Louise. Helen, just a quick one. At Kingswood, we've found, talking to other schools, people won't want to meet in person, people won't want to get together. We've had exactly the opposite situation. We've run 13 events this term since the beginning of September, in-person events, and the bulk of the people who want to come to the events are the older generation, which everyone assumed they wouldn't want to travel. We had one in Exeter, London, and then only on Saturday in Edinburgh, we had 24 people join us in Edinburgh, and we had 18 in London. Now, these are 70-year-old and older generation. They are very keen to get out. Yes, there are some people who couldn't join us because of concerns of COVID, and that's absolutely fine. But our experience at Kingswood is that people want to get together and meet. So where possible, as Dave said and Louise said as well, listen to the people. You know, don't assume everyone will want to come in, but don't equally assume that people don't want to get together. People do want to get out.
Yeah, interesting, hey? It's really interesting, different people's perspective and what the needs are, actually, that personal interaction, I think, for some people. Olivia, you can add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to add, Leslie mentioned one thing is that usually major gifts start with smaller amounts. And this happens, I have mainly a digital background, digital fundraising background. And we've seen that happen a lot in those last years, is that you can have small gifts coming from other countries, because we are also talking about international fundraising across borders. So it starts with a small gift from a country nearby. And then you identify this person as being, at the end, a major donor. So how do you move then from a communication that goes through the masses across borders, and then you build relationship into a one-to-one relationship? And this is something, a process that we need more and more to learn, because this is how our world is shifting now with the digital and the donations across borders.
Leslie.
Olivia, I've just been through a very exciting communication with one of our donors who regularly give year on year. But because of COVID, and unfortunately, this is a donor that has residence both in South Africa and in, one of the other countries. And because she was not able to be or in South Africa and attending any of the operas, she took it upon herself to do a fundraiser for Cape Town Opera in Germany during COVID. And the donation that's coming this year has been tenfold compared to what she donates annually, purely because she has a passion for Cape Town Opera, because she has a real connection for what it is we do. And this is why I put so much importance on just the connections I have with individuals, because one never knows where that leads to.
Absolutely. Actually, that leads on quite nicely to the next questions from Chris for relative startups. So he works for an organisation that's relatively new, and they're working hard to build up credibility. And whilst donations are coming in small amounts, they need the large donations to make greater impact. So I kind of put it to the panel, I guess, as Leslie just said, actually, large donations often come from smaller donations. So maybe, I mean, Dave, about the cultivation and going through the kind of stages and the lovely graphic that you showed, but maybe we can talk through about, well, how do we as a small organization then develop the major donor journey? So Arnaud, do you want to start with that one?
I'm not sure I really heard it. There was a sound problem. Can you repeat the question?
I'm sorry. So as a small organization, how do you begin your journey on major donor fundraising? In a nutshell.
That's a big one. Well,
yeah.
First of all, the thing with international fundraising, normally you have to be a world-class institution to go international. That might not be true for some very specific small organization that can look for donation from outside of their country. I would say the main problem, if you're a small organization and you want to start raising funds is how much money you can invest in raising funds, and that's always the problem. We have the problem with big organizations in France who don't realize that they have to invest before they get funds, before they raise funds. So very tricky. I don't have the answer, actually.
It's that catch-22 that we're forever faced with as fundraisers, right? Convincing the investment before we get the investment. So Dave, you want to add to that?
I think obviously most of us start from scratch at some point, or we join an organization which is starting from scratch or rebuilding. I think my advice would be four key points. One is make sure you know your story. What's your case for support? What are you actually going to be articulating? That's the first thing. Second thing is make sure that your leadership are willing to be involved and can tell that same story and will play a part in telling anybody that will listen what it is that you are trying to achieve. The third one then is a bit more nitty-gritty. Look at your current donors, look at your potential prospects, and whether that generates a list of 10, 15, 20, 50 names, who are those people who have got the greatest affinity with you and have also got the capacity to support you. And once you've started with that list, then look at them as individuals and try to create a little plan for each of those people that will bring them closer to your organization. And that will be different for different people, but that's when you're starting to then draw all the things that we've said together of what are their motivations, what are they trying to achieve, are they willing to travel, will they take meetings, do they want to be on virtual. So you've got an approach that's appropriate for each of those individuals, but it's underpinned by a strong story, a leadership that's going to work with you, and you've identified those first few people, and it will grow as people start to believe in what it is that you are saying and that you deliver on the promise. Then people will start to give in greater amounts, and others will start to join you, and that list of 10 to 15, 20 names will become 100 names, and you'll start to build it out over time. But when you're starting out, those key ingredients put you onto a really strong footing to have those first initial conversations about support.
Thank you, Dave. It's good to break it down, isn't it? Because it can be quite daunting when you begin, when you start. But I think it's good if you break it down to different points, and those 4 points are completely valid. Leslie, you can add to that?
Yes, I'd like to add that if at all possible, take video footage of some of the work that you do. People are not always able to be in your space at the time that you're doing exciting projects. Document that and share that, and invite people on the basis of that when they're next in your country to come and pay you a visit, or ask, open that conversation and say, when are you next visiting us? And just start the relationship. But people are always excited to see, it's one thing hearing and reading what you do, but actually seeing the impact that you make in the communities or with the cause that you are heading up is quite different, because you're seeing the impact and it's almost as though you're there.
Great tip, Leslie. And I guess if you've got video footage, Olivia, I was going to come to you next. How do you make the most use of that digitally, right?
Yeah, you do not have to have the perfect video or something like that. Just something quickly done with your smartphone is much more authentic, actually, than a super video where you pay someone to produce it super nicely. Forget about it. Just the authentic thing, a quick thing on WhatsApp, this is really, really effective. And as you mentioned, Leslie, also start the relationship with that. And then if you want to have a bigger amount in the donation, it's increasing the bond you have with your donor, coming closer to your organization, seeing your impact. And you can invite them, for example, if you're working in the South, invite them in the field. Once they have seen the video, they might be very interested to come see the projects. And once they have really seen the impact, what you are doing concretely, authentically with the stories, with the people telling them the stories, that's when their heart is fully open and when they want to engage with your organization more and more, and then you can start building a very long-lasting relationship with them, because they will always ask you to have some updates. What's happening in this village? What's happening there? Do you have a footage, a video, whatever, a picture? What is happening with this person? This is when the relationship is really effective at the end, and this is where you have a long-lasting, trustful, and authentic relationship with the donor.
Yeah, agreed. And video is often a lot easier to digest, I guess is what we're saying, than long paragraphs and lots of paperwork. And that's why, you know, things like posts on Facebook and Instagram have been so popular, haven't they? Because they're just easily digestible and they get shared easily as well. So agreed, making it authentic as well is also important. Graham, have you got anything to add to that?
Just a quick one. At Kingswood, a number of our major donors are international. They are predominantly all members of our community, so alumni, current, former parents. I'm lucky I do get to travel quite extensively, or I have, not for the last 2 years. But it's not only a case of you being out there and meeting the people. In the first instance, that is ideal. But it's also then leaving a team of volunteers in the countries you visit who are able to carry on the work that you're doing. So within the schools context, I am very lucky to have a North American advisory board, an Asia Pacific advisory board, and also then a Europe, Middle East and Africa advisory board. Some of these on very early stages of growing, but the North American I've been over quite a lot with my CFR e-links. And they, at the end of the day, become your major advocates. I think, as Dave was saying, it's key that you're not the only person telling the story. It's your community telling the story, and it's far more impactful when the volunteer tells the story and makes that contribution and that connection. So get out there face to face in the first instance, but being able to have people out there carrying on those discussions is absolutely key. So don't forget that.
Great, really, really good points. The next question is kind of linked actually. So what's the difference between international cultivation and local or national cultivation? So when you're looking to cultivate your donors, is there a difference between how you do it internationally and how you do it locally? And for that, I'll start with Leslie.
I personally don't differentiate between international and local donors. I think where there is a shared interest in the work that we do, it's to speak to people, it's to speak to their hearts. Earlier on, it was mentioned in one of the slides that people are as choosy about spending their money or investing their money as they are about earning their money. And I think if you give them a good enough reason to invest in your organization, and they can see the impact that their money has on communities, because at the end of the day, we as nonprofit organizations are really there to strengthen our communities in whichever way, shape or form. And it's public money that we're spending, and it's for that public money to really make a difference. And if donors can see that you're really making a difference, whether they live in your country or abroad, they have a keen interest in your cause. And so it's to be relevant, it's to be transparent, it's to be it's to have empathy, and authenticity goes along with that as well. So for me, it's global donors are all in for making a difference in people's lives, and if they choose to support your organization, it really is for you to be spending their monies in the best way possible.
Yeah. I know. What do you think? Would you agree that you had the same message for international cultivation as you would for local cultivation?
I think the message might be different according to your institution or your cause, but I think the process of cultivation is the same, either locally or internationally. And it comes back to this COVID thing. I mean, the advantage of local is that if I have a French institution in Paris and donors in Paris, I can actually organize lunch and meetings in Paris. And that would be the advantage to be cultivating locally for a local organization. But the cultivation is the same process locally or internationally, to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Graham, you agree?
Absolutely. I think one has to be realistic, though, that often international cultivation takes a little more work, takes a little bit longer, but it is the same process. It's relationship building. Just because they are on the other side of the world, you don't assume anything. They're not going to give to you just because they live in America and they went to your school, but they will give to you if you go out there and meet them. You know, as I say, I'm lucky I am able to travel a certain amount, get out there and meet people. I'll never forget a governor at a previous school when I was going out to, I think, Hong Kong for the first time, said to me, "So Graham, how much do you think you got to raise on this trip?" I thought, oh golly, here we go again. And my simple answer was nothing. And after they'd sort of chuckled and put their false teeth back in, they said, "What do you mean?" And I explained it's a relationship building process. The school had never, ever been out to Hong Kong. We will, get together, we'll meet and that. Of course, the next time you go out, you still get together and meet, but then you speak to some people and you build relationships. So it is a process. It is a bit longer internationally, but it doesn't mean that you got to, that you sort of avoid it or not do it. Even if you can't get out there, still start building those relationships virtually and also through someone you've got out there. We've had the case where a former pupil, a former governor has gone out on a holiday and said, "Graham, can I pop in and have a drink with anyone? Would that help?" "Yes, please, thank you." If you can, if they can meet up and be your eyes and ears out there, it makes a huge, huge difference.
Great. Actually, that leads on to another question somebody's asked. Frank's asked about what sort of preparation do you do on that first cultivation meeting? So you're flying off to Hong Kong to meet the donor for the first time. What would you recommend as good preparation before you meet with them, Graham? Just because you came up with that.
Yep. Yeah, sure. Very happy to quickly mention that. Do your research. And that's where your database becomes absolutely crucial, and your community. Well, once again, within the school, a housemaster, if they're still available, the headmaster, anyone who'd know them well. Get as much. It's the old adage. If you don't plan, you fail. If you don't, if you don't, and you fail to plan.
Yeah.
So the crucial thing is do your homework. Once having done that homework, don't assume anything. So often I plan and plan and plan, and half of the stuff I've planned or made notes I don't even look at. That's fine, but if you don't have the notes there and you need them, you'll be in trouble. So do your planning, but go in with an open mind, and as mentioned very, very clearly at that first meeting, zip it and listen. They will tell you what they want to find out. They will ask you questions. Your agenda is irrelevant in those first meetings, especially. It's absolutely irrelevant. Find out what their agenda. If they're meeting you for a reason. Those who don't want to meet you, those who don't care about your school, those who don't like their time, won't get together with you. If they're meeting with you, they are interested in something. Find out what it is.
Good tip. Dave, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that there's some really good points about not rushing the process. Don't abandon best practice just because somebody's living in another country. It takes more time. You need to be sensitive to that. It was interesting when I was on the Case Philanthropy Commission for a few years, and the conversations that you often heard of people that were flying into a country and they just seemed to abandon all that best practice, and they thought they could just fly in, ask for money and fly out, and they would be given it just because they were doing so. So don't abandon that best practice, but equally make sure that you're well versed in the cultural sensitivities of where you're going as well. That's really important, because whilst as Arnaud said, the practice translates from country to country, there are subtleties around those cultural sensitivities and differences that you do need to take account of. Some of them are very mechanical. When are the holidays? You don't go to Thailand at certain times in the year because everybody is celebrating the new year and it's different to other people's. So making sure you've got an understanding of the context in which you're working in. And as Graham said, listen and ask and probe and try to explore what it is their passion is and where it potentially aligns to what you are trying to achieve. I also really like the idea of cultivation is not just a one-person job, as we said, it's a whole team effort. Where can you get the multiplier effect of other people having an input that will move someone closer, strengthen that gift? And we did the same as Graham when our head went to recruit in London in January. We planned events and activities around that. We couldn't always get there because it was a free trip for us. It was already going to do something else. So looking how you can piggyback on other people's activities, I think is another good way to try to get more touch points with people overseas where you wouldn't otherwise be able to do it. But I genuinely think that more people are more willing now to use digital means to have conversations and have interactions than they would have done before the pandemic, because we were all thrown into the same boat. We all had to do the same thing, and it's become an awful lot more normal for people to do so. So that blend of what you can do, what you can get others in your organization to do, and the digital, and see that as an approach to with each individual person.
Can I add something, Ellen?
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's like, I think someone mentioned before, I think it's really important to have an ally on the spot. I did actually the flight to Hong Kong in 2019, and I had the chance to have a real good colleague living in Hong Kong and helping me with the meetings I had, because yeah, the cultural thing is so important. And whether it's a board member, someone from your campaign committee, if you're on campaign, or a consultant colleague, having someone on spot, helping you, being with you, is very important.
Great. This is fascinating, but I'm just conscious of time. We've actually reached our time limit already. We do have a few more questions that have come in on the chat. Thank you to everybody that's participated in the chat. It's been great. Sometimes we do these interactions and get nothing, but we've had great. So we've had lots of questions and lots of comments. So really appreciate that. But I am just conscious of time and that some people might need a coffee or a nature break. So what we will do is we'll carry on the conversation. We can continue to interact on Chaplain York Connect. Please do make use of it. It's a great facility, really good platform. Connect with the speakers, connect with me, connect with the other participants. I will send the questions to the speakers and they can then interact with you and they can give their answers. Apologies that we ran out of time in this session, but we do have the brilliant Ruth O'Hanlon coming up at 10 o'clock GMT time, so in about 10 minutes. So you've got 10 minutes to quickly put the kettle on or make a cappuccino or whatever you do wherever you are. And I want to thank Dave so much for a really insightful session, for the panelists who are going to stay with us and continue this really interesting conversation, and thank you for all of your questions. I think it really makes a difference to have this interaction, to have this kind of backwards and forwards. It makes it a lot more dynamic for everybody, and to have your input is really helpful. So for now, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and I shall see you all back in 9 minutes. You have quickly 9 minutes to go and do whatever you need to do, and see you here back then. So thank you to everybody. Take a pausira. Are you there, Ruth?
I am.
How do you say? I'm just reading through your bio. The Uyghur, is that right?
Uyghur.
Uyghur. Oh, Uyghur. Is that how you spell it?
That's one way of spelling it.
There we go. Student Mandarin Chinese, Uyghur, and Russian.